really try early league stuff, but I would never been coming here, especially with the COVID situations. Plus, why here? I could have otherwise somewhere else, maybe outside DC, going we're not COVID.
Georgetown law.
Probably not Georgetown.
How about
I might have done a Georgia Mason. That would have been my first non-Levi choice.
really? My brother and his wife both got their master's degrees from George Washington in DC. And total shout out to my brother. This guy's an absolute freaking legend, for real. Him and his wife live in Springfield, Virginia. Used to live in Alexandria, Virginia. Absolutely just own the Beltway. They know everything about DC at the back of their hand. They're absolutely amazing people. And they have my brother Conrad and his wife Colby, and they have a dog, a mastiff named Monroe, and a baby daughter named Evie. They're just absolutely crushing at life. They're awesome. P.S. They're awesome. Okay, let's get started. Wow, what did we talk about last class? Brad King doesn't know. Brad King wasn't here. He is here now. Welcome, Brad King. Remember, we've established many times in the past his middle name is the. So, Your Highness, welcome. We talked about what the Black Plague was last class. We're just going to get into Catholic reaction, just get after it. And hello, Becca Schmidt on the Zoom chat as well. We already said hi to Betsy Johnson, who hoped my coffee was excellent. I wrote, indeed. Then I wrote, P.S. Then I wrote, it is. So welcome to everyone watching online. Welcome to everyone in real life. Okay. Reaction to the Black Plague. Last class, we covered all the facts. Everything, as I say ad nauseum, and I am saying right now, I'm in the process of going ad nauseum, repeating myself, is on Maple Syrup History YouTube channel, which I've sent out many times over our link. And you can access all the old episodes there. I will say once more, the last kind of repetitive point, I hope to post these always there. That was the silver lining of the pandemic of originally trying to keep the class afloat at distance. Because when I first started here, pre-pandemic, it was just in person, kind of normal with no video component. But now we always hope to have that. So if you miss anything, or if you feel like I would like to catch up on an old episode, they're all there, barring some non-recording issue or whatever. So I won't retrod that old ground. We talked about the effects. We're talking about what the Black Plague was. Here is the second part of the Black Plague. So point number one, I have something like 20 points for you, so 44 points total. Number one, it has been suggested that the plague, like some others in history, disproportionately affected the poorest people, who are already in generally worse physical condition than wealthier citizens. This is one of these kind of tragic, obvious points throughout history. How often do we hear, look at recently like Hurricane Katrina and the Ninth Ward, the breaking of the levee, and that, it affected this, low-income neighborhood that was already perhaps built in a questionable area with no flood protection whatsoever in a city that's already, at or below sea level. How often do we hear, in the wake of this hurricane in South Carolina, well, the poor people didn't have the access to the evacuation, or weren't even aware perhaps, et cetera, et cetera. And being Catholic, right? Without overstating kind of obvious points, right? Christ, in his Beatitudes in Matthew, says, blessed are the poor in spirit. In Luke, just blessed are the poor, just period. And so to always care for the poor, to see Christ in the poor. And indeed, this is one of those things that hides in plain sight. We hear this so many times about loving and taking care of the least among us. That hymn, whatever you did to the least of my people, you did unto me. But I think we forget about it. It's good to just be reminded. Of course, right? If you're well, it's not that if you're wealthy at that time, like you have access to the Mayo Clinic or some special vaccine or whatever, but you have better nutrition, you're in maybe better physical shape owing to your state in life. Maybe you're not this kind of day laborer being worked to the bone like you would be in the gulag, where it was something like, God bless those people, God rest their souls. People who were sent to the gulags by Stalin died within like about 10 days because they work all day with no food and just are worked to death. So point number one is kind of an obvious point. Point number two is a very controversial, interesting point. Maria, I'd like you to weigh in. Welcome to class, by the way. And hello to Hunter, if he's watching later on the stream. Hunter is an awesome guy. His presence is missed in class. So if he's watching later, he'll be hearing me say this not in the present moment. The present moment is now. It'll be recorded later, but he's a really cool guy. I wish he was here. So hello to him. Okay, this is a controversial thing, but people say the Black Death in some ways caused both the Renaissance and the Protestant Reformation. That's weird, right? I mean, really, like the Renaissance follows about 100 years after this. You're talking at the earliest, kind of mid-15th century. Luther doesn't post his 95 Theses to 1517, almost 200 years after this, 170 years after this. Yeah, is that just BS? What do you think? Really? For real, dude? Well, what are your thoughts? Does the Black Death have anything to do with either the Renaissance or the Reformation? Or are these clown historians, who, by the way, let me say it again, are beclowned in their analysis, simply just cherry picking from a modern seat looking back, Monday morning quarterback, and saying, that was a big event, Black Plague. Here's two big events. I bet they're connected. They're just making connections up. What do you all think?
Yeah, I mean, Varro believes Pascal's image, Cleopatra's nose. I think we talked about this last year. Blaise Pascal, the great Catholic thinker, the philosopher, said that all history would change had Cleopatra's nose been different. Because if Cleopatra's nose were ugly, it was misshapen and lumpen, Mark Antony probably would have fallen for her, and then there would have been all this intrigue going on in Egypt, and all these things would have rounded out differently, and then probably Rome wouldn't have had control of the Nile area and things like that. So I don't know. It's like it's almost tautological to say things like, yeah, the Black Death caused the Renaissance or the Reformation. It's simple. Yeah, of course.
Okay.
Okay, so from a Christian perspective and a Catholic perspective, I think we think God has everything in control, right? And there's a big plan and we don't understand the little things that get to the big plan. So that's what a very global thought. Yeah, there were probably elements in the Black Plague that helped bring about the Renaissance and the Protestant Reformation. My gut feeling would be that less the Protestant Reformation, given the sort of superhuman compassion of the Catholic religious during the Black Plague. It would make me think that you would be less likely to see Christianity in a different form. But maybe people were looking for beauty after the horror.
Okay, so that's
the Renaissance.
Yeah, that's a very good answer. Everything you said is very good, I think. I think the main two contentions of this yes argument, the response that they were impacted, was with the mass death of the Black Plague. Remember, some people estimate that Norwegian guys said up to 60% of Europe dies. With the mass death, the value of workers increases. Better economic opportunity perhaps increases because they're less expendable. It's not like you're talking earlier about issues, with cheap labor and whatever. It's not like, hey, dude, if you won't take 10 cents an hour, there's 50,000 people behind you who will. Just get out of here. It's kind of the abuse of the labor class, which the church has always stood against. Again, I highly recommend everyone. This is neither here nor there at all for this class, but read Rerum Novarum, Quadragesima Annos, Centesimus Annus, these great Laborum Exercens, which is 1981. These, Catholic social teaching. There's something for anyone there. If you're like, you know what, I'm about all pre-Vatican II documents, then read Rerum Novarum, Quadragesima Anno, 1891, 1931, Leo XIII and Pius XI. But if you're like, a JP2 is my guy, I'm a JP2 Catholic, I love him, St. John Paul the Great, Laborum Exercens and Centesimus Annus are his. But in both ways, right? Anyways, maybe we'll do a class on economics one day. That'd actually be really fun and useful probably. But there's this economic argument that labor becomes more valued. People can seek more creative employment because they're not just working for nothing. They travel more, paradoxically, perhaps, in the wake of this death event. You start seeing the seeds of globalization. One of my other classes, I'm doing a class strictly on globalization. To your earlier question about talking about courses and stuff, I'm doing a class on globalization. Globalization kind of takes off after this moment. Think about Marco Polo. He's actually even prior to the Black Plague. He's 1200s. So causes the Renaissance. Commoners have more money, more appreciation, more desire for leisure in life. maybe artists are pushed more to like, let their talent flourish. But again, you're grasping at straws kind of, I think, with that. The Reformation argument, man, talk about just like, there's so many rabbit holes with this. What caused Reformation? I don't know. I mean, it's like a million factors, right? But their argument here is, I finished last class saying, look at all the hero priests and the heroine nuns. And there were a lot of that. This guy's argument, I'm going to read you from this guy's master thesis, is that a lot of priests shirked their duties, only looked out for number one, didn't help. So people were like, fine, I don't trust the priestly authority anymore. I don't trust the church. These guys are supposed to die for their flock. And they're just like bouncing from the area. So again, now I am becoming a huge believer in, and it's making me love and respect God all the more. It's very good of like, can you imagine like all the stuff God has to keep in his mind? And obviously Aquinas, I am saying this kind of facetiously and like in a joking way of, Aquinas perfectly says, God is known to us by analogy. God doesn't just have a super smart mind. It's a divine, it's there's no comparison. It's infinity to zero. So it's not like, well, can you imagine how much studying God has to do? Like, God is God. Putting that aside, that God is always present everywhere and it's perfect knowledge and all that stuff. And we are absolutely not God in any way. It's just like God in his eternal now beholds all perspectives at once, all the time, all that, our argument, the counter argument, every rabbit hole at once. And because he is the way, the truth, and the life, knows what is the proper way, and that's his providential hand you're talking about, kind of guiding history. What caused the Reformation? I have no idea beyond the traditional. Oh, it was the selling of indulgences. Oh, it was this? It was corruption. Like, there's a million factors. This is one more factor this guy says. Is there probably something true to this? Sure, there's truth everywhere. Is this the main reason? Oh, if priests just were more heroic in the Black Plague, there'd be no Protestant revolt. No, I think that's ridiculous, right? So again, like, no finality here in my analysis at all. It's probably certainly part of the calculus, but again, it's kind of hard to say too about causal factors, cause and effect when it's 170 years in the future. That'd be like saying things that are happening in 2023 now were caused by things in 1853. I guess you could. And you could say like the American Civil War, those divisions have some impact on us. If you think truly, may God forbid it, if we're heading towards a second Civil War, well, then actually that'd be very appropriate. That events 170 years ago and decade of the 1850s, fine. You get my point. We're not often talking about things that happened in the 1850s having direct effect on today. So anyways, point number 4, this is a kind of a recap point. Cairo's population, partly owing to the numerous plague epidemics, was in the early 18th century, 1700s, half of what it was in 1347. This was Clay Zimmerman, who sat in that chair last class, his point about, population perhaps never being so wilted, so attacked, so stunted, so decimated, whatever word you want to use, as during this Black Plague epidemic. Here's an interesting point number 5, kind of a factual tidbit. If we just finish the class right now, we've gotten a lot on the Black Plague. I think we've covered it kind of which I'm glad we're doing 2 classes, and we're not even close to done, of course, but here's a kind of tidbit points. We haven't had a lot of meat, like talking about the epidemiology and the transmission and the church's response is very meat, very kind of like bare bones necessity stuff. Here's just kind of just, hey, FYI, the word quarantine comes from this time. Quarantino, right? Italian word for quaranta, 40. So you come in the city, you're going to be put away for 40 days.
Even better, the Tino part is approximately 40.
Yeah.
Black Plague, I think I understand what you said. How did the Black Plague and some of that lead to globalization?
That for the first time, because of the mass decimation, perhaps in earlier times, you were self-sufficient in your local community. Everything was just kind of right down the street, whatever. Everyone's dead in my city. I'm going to travel to the next city. I'm going to look beyond. But then that's, again, my earlier point about God's perfect divine wisdom that encapsulates all 100. That's one factor. Another factor is just in the march of progress. Why do we have cell phones now? Because Alexander Graham Bell and the telegraph and these things that just move, people just try to invent stuff. Thomas Edison famously, right, with the light bulb, like didn't invent it 1,000 times. That means he spent his entire life tinkering in a shop. People are just doing that. So things just, inventions come about, whatever. But the Black Plague argument is that labor became more valued because there was less labor. Indeed, imagine if I'm some oligarch boss who hates his workers, doesn't care at all, pay him dirt wages, and I have a worker pool of 1,000, I can treat them like garbage. I have a worker pool of 1,000 for 80 jobs. What happens when I have 90 workers left for 80 jobs? I better treat them like they're my children, right? And so workers make more money, they have maybe more money to spend on leisure. And the whole idea, again, that Greco-Roman, but especially Roman, it's a Latin term too, the otium liberale, the idea of like the polished man, especially like a senator who retires to write his memoirs. And Augustine, who has an otium liberale, he's recovering from some illness, where I believe he writes Confessions or City of God. He writes maybe both works during this period, but he's kind of just seriously like sitting in a villa and just thinking and writing. And so again, it's one of many factors. But that would be the argument. The worker pool is humanly decimated, therefore the value goes up because there's less workers. It's a very kind of capitalistic argument. Imagine if there was, one plumber in all of Moscow, Pullman. Would you be surprised? No one else knew how to plumb. No one else had to do any of that stuff. And not even in any kind of like basic way, right? No one knew how to do any of that stuff. Would you be surprised if he was a billionaire? Literally, no, because he charges if your pipe breaks, he charges you for a house visit, $17,000. Because that's how, right? But imagine if everyone was a plumber. There'd be like someone working, for minimum wage. So there is that kind of like, demand and need. There's a reason why Armani pays me $15,000 a year to wear their ties. There's a reason behind all these things. There's always a reason.
That's the question, and maybe a deviation, and maybe you already covered it. But I'm not a historian, so the context of the Black Plague, are we still living in a time where it's a feudal system where people are primarily subsisting based on living on a lord's land?
Yes, 100% yes.
And so it's question one, if that's true, aren't they actually tied to the land? Are they allowed to move? Do they need to get permission to move?
Yeah, I'm not sure. That's where, again, my one kind of foregoing promise in this class always, I'm not going to give you false information. I don't know how, you almost think about like manumission. When slaves were granted their freedom, there's a similar system of like having those ties removed. I have no idea how that process worked. Outside of the fact that by fiat, the feudal lord could say, Marie, you're giving you your freedom, go do whatever you want, right? Yeah, the whole idea of the feudal system was the feudal serf, work the land for the lord. In turn, I have all my needs met, but I have to work his land, stock his barns, and fight for him, especially, right? These like kind of local wars. Crusades are just like picking people off of feudal farms. And it's like all the people are going to fight under the banners, the respective lord, but in the larger kind of conglomerate of that local, vice principality, whatever, under the kingdom, all that kind of stuff. Yes, it is a feudal system. The Industrial Revolution really kicks in a high gear mid-18th century. And there's a reason why Karl Marx writes Das Kapital and Communist Manifesto with Engels in the 1840s, like Manchester becoming black with smoke and factories in the 1820s, 30s. This is 500 years before that.
So the globalization portion, even if their labor is worth more, if they don't have the freedom to leave, or our Lord saying the owners of the great, land masses saying, I can't support all of you anymore. I need some of you to leave.
Sure, that's probably a thing too. Yeah. I mean, I look at Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which is a disaster that we'll cover in this class, the atomic age later on, as the best example for the Black Plague. Like, how else does a city become completely devastated and ruined? And so it's like, sure, a lot of these feudal lords is like, that life is over, just period. I need to rebuild completely from scratch, and all of you have to get out. We're all serfs now, or whatever, kind of stuff. I don't know. But yeah, go.
Was there any difference based on socioeconomics that in who died?
Yes, that's the first point that I started with.
Sorry.
No, stop. I hate that kind of stuff. You guys know how much I love being like fake rude and like fake, like you're all idiots, whatever. I would never be like, oh, pay attention. That's
so asleep.
I know. No. But that I really hate kind of school marmish, like, well, you would know if you listen. I hate that. I'm simply saying of like, fret not, I have the answer, I already read it. Yes, the first thing that I said was, it has been suggested the plague, like some others of history, disproportionately affected the poorest people who are already in generally worse physical condition than wealthier citizens, end quote. So, then we went on this long spiel about this is like, the whole thing in Christianity of loving the poor, seeing the Christ in the poor. The poor are always disproportionately affected. And I talked about like hurricanes and disasters, and poor people live like in the 9th ward, under the levees in this place that probably shouldn't even be built. And of course, during Katrina, they suffer the most. This is the oldest story of humanity. So yes, in the plague, and especially because too, with work and like having to be this serf who works all day and maybe gets bad food, is not well nourished, yeah, you're gonna have all the more of that, affecting you in some way. So yeah, it's a good question. No, I have my whole plan of like the lecture and stuff. I love when you guys weigh in and all. You're all so smart and have great points. So never feel bad for that. Now, guys, here's the thing I have to tell you though. And actually, I'm gonna finish with this one thing at the end. Please remind me, okay? Meg Clark, would you mind just say, hey, you said you're gonna finish with this one thing on the end on page 6. I want to come back and have this be the final discussion point we make. So remind me if I forget. Really quickly, Brad, for you especially too, because you weren't here last class. COVID-19 has killed roughly 0.2% of the US population, or about 680,000 people. To have a similar impact as the Black Death, it would need to kill 25 to 60%. That would be between 80 and 200 million people. So you put it into perspective, in last class I said, like, I think COVID-19 is serious. I got COVID-19, I hated it. God bless people who are like, immunocompromised or whatever, who really had a tough time. But at the same time, that being noted, COVID-19 is not the Black Plague in any way at all, like not even close. In its mortality rate, its R0 rate, its effects, anything. The Black Plague is, we don't want to fall into this modern hubris and myopia of like, well, we had our Black Plague too. Like COVID-19 is not the Black Plague. It's just not. That once more, maybe the theme of today's class is God's infinite, perfect, and eternally now knowledge. That doesn't mean it wasn't the Black Plague, therefore it's the opposite. It's nothing. It's a joke. I'm not saying that, right? I'm just saying that like it's not the Black Plague. It's like my friend who walked on to the Vandal basketball team and ended up being like all Big Sky and played professionally in Germany. That guy's really good at basketball. He's one of the 1%. He's not Michael Jordan though. I don't just say he's not Michael Jordan, right? Michael Jordan is the greatest basketball player of all time. My friend is not that. But that means your friend's terrible. Then no, my friend is in the 1% of everyone in the world. Is amazing. He's a college star, played professionally. He's just not Michael Jordan. COVID-19 is not serious. It's just not the Black Plague. Please stop, right? So now the reactions again. Meg Clark's going to remind me. I hope I don't forget. If I do, thank you in advance for reminding me. Page 6. Remember, the calamity produces extreme reactions. What was the most famous group of people who are produced in response to this? What do they do? Their name is their action. Everyone's dying in the Black Plague. This now is the kind of nuts and bolts part 2 of the Catholic response. The rest of the class is just, we talked all about the facts. It's what was this group called? Who were they? Anyone know? Nope. Not what I'm looking for. You just lost $16,000 and lost to be a millionaire. You picked A. You should have phoned a friend. You should have phoned Meg Clark. Always call Meg Clark. What is this group called?
Is this group in good standing or bad standing?
None of your business. Just answer the question. Kind of both. So they're very controversial. And I'll finish your answer to your direct question. They at first are welcome, they're beloved by the people, then the Pope eventually shuts them down. So are they in good standing? And he doesn't shut them down like you're heretics, or he's like, no more of this. What is this? That seems like there'd be a good candidate. It's not them. That's Crusades, right? That's the Knights Templars certainly around for a long time, kind of doing their own thing, kind of as like vigilante, whatever, original Wild West cowboy type knights. No, it is not the Knights Templar, not these people. Who are these people? They are the flagellants. What are the flagellants? Who were these people? What was this group?
People beat themselves.
People who beat themselves in penitential reparation, as they would claim for this. The point I'm going to finish with, Meg Clark, is we're going to talk about, is this God's just punishment upon people? You want a cheat sheet for this whole class, Catholicism Disasters? It often comes down in a Catholic reaction. Is God punishing us for our sins? So you've probably all heard the great chastisement, these kind of thing, like God did in the past chastise the Jewish people for their misdeeds and straying from the covenant, and Christians are chastised. And Our Lady of Fatima, if you do not stop offending God, a worse war will break out. This question often comes about in history. Does a father not eventually have to send his kids to the room, put them in the corner? He has to punish them if they won't stop making that noise. Oh, the father is so mean because he made his son, he had to be separate from the family to go sit in his room. No, he had to be punished eventually. He wouldn't listen to stop saying that bad word or something. So is that how God works too? I mean, that's a question we have to ask at the end. I don't want to talk about that now. I want to finish the class on that, because that's the ultimate Catholic reaction class. How does God's chastisement work? You're welcome to say what I'm going to tell you right now. I don't know. Blessed be God forever. I love those divine praises. You should say the divine praises and memorize them if you haven't memorized them. They're beautiful. Blessed be God forever. I say that with fear of the Lord is the beginning of all wisdom. I say with like respect. I don't know. Can't step into God's mind at all. I don't know what's chastisement, what's not. Christ famously says in the Gospels, when the Tower of Siloam falls into people, and there are people are saying like, oh, they were so bad. And then he says, you think you're better than them, right? The same thing will happen to you if you don't repent. We're all guilty. We've all, as St. Paul says, fallen short in sin. Let's save that discussion up for the end, please. That's what I want to finish on. These flagellants say yes, and they walk round and round and do this, according to the chronicler Heinrich of Herford. Ready? Quote, I have seen when they whipped themselves how the iron points became so embedded in the flesh that sometimes one pull, sometimes two, was not enough to extract them. They wandered the land, but when they came to cities, towns, and large villages and settlements, they marched down the street in procession with their hoods or hats pulled down a little to cover their foreheads. They're doing these, end quote, they're doing this, public acts. Everyone has seen the Passion, Gibson's Passion, I assume, right? When Christ is being scourged at the pillar and like sticks in his side, right? Like they're like doing this themselves. They're scourging themselves in repentance. The flagellants required members to pledge not to leave the fraternity without permission of superiors, to practice silence. However, here's a point in their favor: to never scourge themselves to the point of illness or death. So Ryan, you're joining our group, saying, don't overdo it, buddy. Like you're known for your zeal. You're known for your zeal. Don't go nuts. Okay. Do proper reparation. We don't want you actually dead. That's a sin of like overzealousness or whatever. That's a lack of the cardinal virtue of temperance, right? You're not being temperate. Don't go nuts. Mother Angelica famously on the next point, to give alms to the poor. Mother Angelica, I'll never forget when she said this. By the way, I'm not some like fanboy of Mother Angelica. I hate that. Mother Angelica was, this famous EWTN. She founded EWTN. You got to like her. I actually like her. I will only say I like people if I actually like them, not because I'm supposed to like her. There are people I'm supposed to like that are Catholic celebrities who I won't mention, who I do not like.
She
So,
terrified me.
I like, she did what, Claire? Terrified you.
Me.
Yeah, she was hilarious. She told one archbishop to stick his head in the toilet, literally. In relation to something at World Youth, I think at World Youth Day, indeed, blessed be God forever. You know how, I'm not even being sarcastic, I am kind of like feminist in some ways, like female empowerment. I'm all about that. A woman should never play Christ in the Stations of the Cross. That is blasphemous. Christ is a man. Like he came, true God, true man. That is blasphemous nonsense. Even as I say again, I'm a person without joke, like women should have equal pay, blah, blah, blah. Anyways, Mother Angelica went nuts on this bishop, and she literally told him, go stick your head in the toilet, flush repeatedly or something. And people got mad. I was with her all the way. She's awesome. She did, yeah, because she was this Italian girl from like New York somewhere. I don't know if it was New York City or upstate New York, but she had that kind of old school, great sense of humor, very kind of salty, but like, I find those saltiest people who have no problem like saying stuff like that are the kindest, most good-hearted people. They get out there kind of vitriol in a funny way. They're not bitter, backbiting. They just say it. They'll say it to your face. Mother Angelica, I remember watching one of her talks, the EWTN Live, about giving alms to the poor. She said the father who would receive $100 paycheck just for the purpose of mathematical simplicity and give it all to the poor is committing a sin because he's supposed to feed his family first. That's not charity. That's an abuse of charity. Now, giving nothing is also sinful. That's why you have a tithe or a small amount. So the same thing. These flagellants, Mother Angelica style, to their credit, are saying you're not supposed to beat yourself till you die. Give alms to the poor, and above all, and good for them too, pray for an end to the pestilence. Matthew Kelly, I talk about him often. Matthew Kelly, the kind of self-help Catholic guy. That is what he is. That is his genre. He's a very positive Australian motivational speaker, self-help guy. I've read almost all of his books, and in alternating ways have both criticized him as like, dude, tone it down with the kind of like Tony Robbins, whatever. And also I really like him a lot. It's a real kind of like this kind of balancing. Matthew Kelly well said though in one of these books, like Rediscovering Catholicism, that one of the biggest faults of our modern society is action without prayer. People do stuff but don't first commit it to God. And in the rule of St. Benedict, the Benedictine priest who wrote the intro says that you should always, when you start work, commit it to God in some way. Lord, please bless this work I'm about to do. Amen. Done, right? Whatever. In the name of your beloved Son, Jesus Christ. Whatever prayer you want. Blessed Mother, help me do well on this thing, this test. So this is good. Flagellant's positive. They do this public reparation that people today would find horrifying, but they're not extreme. They give to the poor. People love them. People generally view them favorably because of these extreme penances. They're like, these guys are putting their money where these guys are literally, talk about like a cliche, skin in the game. They're removing skin. Like they're literally walking the walk. They're just saying, oh, woe to you, Bethsaida and all, as when Christ denounces the kind of the cities and stuff. They're not just saying, whoa, they're actually, as Christ ultimately did. Talk about putting Christ says, whoa, 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 and then he goes and dies. The sinless lamb, ultimate skin in the game, dies on the cross. People are probably not going to take your denunciation seriously if you don't put your money where your mouth is. Christ is the ultimate example of fulfilling that. If he'll denounce people and then, right and rightfully so, but then do the ultimate act of self-sacrificial love, right? Lay down his life ultimately. These guys imitate Christ in some way like that. They're viewed positively. However, in the end, the Pope, who at that time is Clement VI, he's Pope from 1342 to 52, 10 years. He suppresses them by papal bull because he finds them, their quote, independent streak troublesome and their unorthodox preaching styles, quote, unacceptable. I don't know what they were preaching exactly, but the other stuff sounded good. But so, Ryan, you see why it was difficult for me to answer your question. They seem like they have church approval in some ways. And I am not the church comes from the people. No, the authority of the church comes from God. It's top down. It's not the Constitution, that you elect the church, whatever. I'm not saying popular approbation means orthodoxy. It seemed everyone kind of seemed to, hey, they're doing penance, they're praying, and they're walking the walk, but eventually they become maybe a distraction, kind of. That's number one reaction, Catholic reaction. Number one Catholic reaction is these extreme penances, these flagellants. Sadly, of course, right, you have some people who just fall into the kind of anti-Semitic thing, and a lot of people are blaming, if they're not saying that God is punishing us, saying it's the Jewish people who are doing all this kind of stuff, they're behind the plague, they're poisoning wells, all that. To the Pope's credit, the same Pope, Pope VI, says no. He issues this bull, Sicua Judaeus, in July 1348, declaring, he orders, and God bless him, as the Vicar of Christ, Christian leaders, who all the leaders then must protect Jews throughout Christendom. You are not allowed, God forbid, to do pogroms and whatever, but you're not allowed to even blame Jews. This is not, everyone is suffering, the Pope is saying. Stop taking these kind of low-hanging fruit answers. Oh, it's the Jews. Oh, it's the Polacks. Oh, the Irish are behind it. Well, it's the one world order. It's like finding a scapegoat, so to speak. Tom Richards has been in this class before. You might know him, Tom and Janet, yes? You know what I'm talking about? He's an awesome guy, a parishioner, and he was really big into Rene Girard and gave me some of his books. Girard, the philosopher, is famous for the scapegoat theory. People are always looking for a scapegoat. So here, the scapegoat, oh, it's the Jews. Oh, it's the Muslims. Oh, it's whoever. Here's what the Pope says. Pope says, no, quote, it does not seem credible that the Jews on this occasion are responsible for the crime, nor that they caused it, because this nearly universal pestilence, in accordance with God's hidden judgment, has afflicted and continues to afflict the Jews themselves. Everyone is suffering from this. We're all in this boat together. Okay, so that's two reactions. Here's a third reaction. The disruption of the sacramental line. Waves of plague and warfare could disrupt every aspect of the ideal confession. Rapid illness can make it impossible to travel to one's parish priest, remember one's sins, or speak them aloud. Some people had to confess without anyone to absolve them. There are at times, I think I'll read further along in the notes, which is kind of off the top of my head right now, where, and here's maybe you can read if you want to be really, the Protestant Reformation angle, where even local bishops are encouraging people just to confess directly to God. There are no priests available. Just confess. It is beautiful, right? I think all of you know this. In the absence of confession, you can do an act of perfect contrition, right? If you do that, even mortal sin is washed away. However, before you receive communion the next time, you must go to confession. But in the absence, you can do an act of perfect contrition. Meditating upon a cross, who is suffering, why, what is the purpose? Jesus Christ suffered crucifixion to save my soul. Meditate out of love for God, perfect contrition. I'm sorry for my sins out of love for God, not just the fear of hell. So that's the Catholic response. The Protestant people say, oh, see, the church is saying we just, you don't need a priest, you need confessional. Well, that's because all sacramental life is disrupted. They're not just willy-nilly saying, oh, confession's over, it's not a thing anymore. No, come on, stop that. It's very disingenuous. Go ahead.
I was saying Thomas said, he actually has a Summa article on that thing, whether you should confess. I don't have a priest, should I confess? He says, yes, because it's still a sacramental, it's not a sacrament. Sacramental, like doing any other kind of.
It's always good to tell God you're sorry. Yeah.
It's good to tell, or even just tell it to a layman.
Yeah.
Someone
Yeah.
who doesn't have the ability to absolve you, because he'll say, I want to get this off my chest and tell you this. And then because you're still doing things for order, physical acts for ordering the right spiritual end. There's just not that guarantee of spiritual grace, which comes with the sacrament of confession.
Right.
And the tales all
Right, yeah, exactly, yeah, but I'm not gonna say anything that's perfectly put, exactly. And a final point, point number 4, so if number 1 again was just remember, what was our first point? The first point was the flagellant, the extreme reaction group, scapegoating, lack of sacramental life. Our fourth Catholic reaction is kind of a preface of World War I and desensitization to death. Talked about the mass trenches in World War I, no man's land, machine guns, corpses everywhere. You see this here as well.
Looks like you get the chapels that are made out of bones.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. A desensitization to death and suffering. You become, once you see it 90 times a day, it's not as shocking anymore, sadly, just like the soldiers in the First World War and that kind of thing. And we talk about today in our culture, we say people are desensitized to violence. Or, God forbid, look at the pornography epidemic. People are desensitized to sexual intimacy because of the perversion of that. And so husbands and wives have all these kind of awful problems because et cetera, et cetera. So a similar kind of variation on a theme of like people are seeing stuff they should not be seeing every day, all this death. And so it changes attitudes around death and dying.
As Strongman said, one death is a tragedy.
Right.
Millions of deaths
Statistic.
are a statistic.
Right, exactly. Yep, absolutely awful. Okay, so the last thing I want to kind of conclude with, I'm really going to conclude back, like I said, to the point on page 6 about asking, is this God's just judgment? I'll weigh in first when we get to that by saying, number 1, I don't know. I submit everything to God's divine wisdom. I do not know, but here's the reason why it might be. The Pope seems to say it is. When he was refuting people who are being anti-Semitic, he's like, the Jews are affected too. What is his exact words? In accordance with God's hidden judgment. So he certainly thinks that there is, a providential hand in this, because of course one might say, a believer might say there's a providential hand in everything, right? Before we get to there, Ole Miss honors thesis by McLurney H. Zenter. And I wrote next to his bio, give this guy props and love. And I will, he's a lawyer, man. I'm gonna give him mad props. What do you call a lawyer? You don't call him your honor. What do you call him? The honorable? No, it's also
Esquire.
You Esquire, really? Nothing? Just Mr.?
I think I just do Mr. Or you say, I don't know, Esquire's kind of.
Oh, I'm gonna call him
At least
Duke.
around here is pretentious.
Of course it is. It's disgustingly pretentious. That is why, I mean, if you don't understand, like I prefer everyone call me Karashian. Oh, is that because you're not proud? I'm so proud of my PhD. I'm so glad I got a PhD. It was awesome. Thank God. I don't call him being called Dr. Groshin is gross. It's like makes you feel like I'm, it's so pretentious.
There's a really interesting, this is like a sovereign citizen legal argument involving Esquire. I don't know if you've heard of this.
No,
So have you heard of the original 13th Amendment?
they have not.
Well, there's some crackpot legal theory from this is popular in the 1800s, so there's a different 13th Amendment.
That's not the ending of
It's
slavery.
not the ending of slavery. 13th Amendment strips citizenship of anyone who received a title. And it was just an automatic stripping.
So if
you have an official title.
Ryan Alexander Esquire, turn your passport.
And this being ratified by like 2 states or something like that. But because it was ratified by so many states, some books actually published it as if it had already been amended. So some people had copies of books that had this 13th Amendment in it. And they were arguing to courts as like, you're not even a citizen of this country. You can't even prosecute me because you have this Esquire or honorable or something behind your name, which is how it's titled.
That I'm not even kidding. Like I like legalese stuff a lot. Anyways, there was a time when I think when Antonin Scalia died, God rest his soul, I watched all of his interviews like for a long time, all of his talks. It was fantastic. And again, the Mother Angelica thing. Oh, you just like Scalia because he had 9 kids, he's Catholic, his son's a blah blah blah. No, like I really just actually enjoyed it. I enjoyed his interviews. A person I love listening to is Clarence Thomas. I find his interviews like fascinating. I love listening to him. So I like legal stuff like as a non-lawyer, 100% outside that profession. But often there's some lawyer stuff that's like, dude, it's like historical. It's like way too jargony. That is really cool. That is hilarious. I'm going to remember the old 13th Amendment. You're not even a citizen. You don't even belong here. You're Officer Jones. You have a title. You have no jurisdiction. That's hilarious. That is so good. Well, anyways, I'm going to call this guy Duke. Duke Zentner. This guy is I'm giving him a title. Okay. Duke is what? That's pretty high in the British peerage system.
Mhm.
Actually, let's demote him, Meg. He's an Earl now. He's Earl Zentner. And he's University of Mississippi. This is his honors thesis from 2015, entitled, quote, "The Black Death and its Impact on the Church and Popular Religion." So I was happy I found this in my digging. research searching, flying through this. He says, he right away asks, is it true that the Renaissance and Reformation, I got this from Duke or Earl, Zentner, from his argument, that perhaps that has some kind of cause and effect. I said, I don't know. We talked about that a little bit. A lot of his stuff is stats, but there's some interesting quotes. So Bishop Ralph Shrewsbury of Bath and Wells. Now remember, the UK at this time, England, is 100% Roman Catholic. All the nonsense with Henry VIII doesn't start until 1533. I think everyone knows that. Like, oh, well, yeah, Bishop Ralph, this Anglican. No. This is Catholicism at this point. This is not, there's no Anglican church yet. Despite the fact that the British think that the Catholic Church broke away from the Anglican Church, despite their kind of foregoing hubris. No. Bishop Ralph Shrewsbury of Bath and Wells delivered a renowned decree in 1349. Dealing with Christians dying with the sacrament of penance, he explained the cause of this when he stated that, quote, priests cannot be found to take care on the care of these places. Priests cannot be found to take on the care of these places, neither out of devotional zeal nor for payment, or to visit the sick and administer the church sacraments to them, perhaps because they are infected or have fear of being infected. The bishop ordered the clergy of his diocese to publicize the fact that a sick or dying individual should make a confession to a lay person if a priest was not available. He added that if people, quote, all direct quote now, when on the point of death cannot secure the services of a properly ordained priest, they should make confession of their sins to any lay person, even to a woman if a man is not available, end quote. So, I mean, you see where Protestants read in, oh, see, so like the whole male priesthood, blah, blah, blah. I mean, these are extreme circumstances. Giovanni Boccaccio, let me read it more potentially. Ready? Giovanni Boccaccio. I hate that. I hate when people in the middle of like doing a talk. Like if I'm going to talk about like Antonio Banderas, he's a Spanish actor, right? I would say it this way, and then I decided I'm a really big fan of Antonio Banderas and the work he's in, like that. And then I decided that I'm a really big fan of Antonio Banderas, and always like when they drop into the accents, like that's not sophisticated. That's Esquire crap. Just pronounce it like gringo. If you're speaking English, pronounce it gringo, right? Her name is like, Sofia Cuentes, like that. Not Sofia Cuentes, like don't do that. It's called Giovanni Boccaccio. It's so obnoxious. This guy, Boccaccio, described hasty burials that were performed by priests in the wake of the plague. Quote, nor were these dead honored with tears, candles, or mourners. It had come to such a pass that men who died were shown no more concern than dead goats. End quote. So you see this very sad, God rest your souls. This is your point you asked about, what's the last point? It's like desensitization to death. Man, that's awful. A witness at Avignon spoke of a similar instance, quote, no priest came to hear the confession of the dying and administer sacraments to them. People only care for their own health and that of their families. All right. But in response to this, last 2 points from Duke Zentner's kind of thing. Last two thing is that Christians start building a lot more private chapels, like you explained. And what becomes very, very popular? We talked about the flagellants being very popular between 1349 and 1360. What increases dramatically? A kind of Christian practice. Anyone know? Pilgrimages. The pilgrimage. Why was the Stations of the Cross devotion developed, which St. John Paul II did every day during Lent and every Friday throughout the year? Maybe it's a good thing to do, even Fridays outside of Lent. But so you didn't have to go do the Via Dolorosa in Jerusalem. You could do the pilgrimage from your own home parish. And I think if you do, if I'm not mistaken, please do not take my word on this, but I believe I've read this. If you do the Stations of the Cross and meet some other kind of requirements on Fridays in Lent, you receive a plenary indulgence, which is awesome. So devotions pick up, pilgrimages pick up. That's good. I'll give the Pope the final words. We are blessed, praise Jesus Christ, with great priests. You all know I am sincerely, as my friend, my boss, the past year, I'm obsessed with Father Chase. Like, I wish all priests were like him. Thank God for him. Father Ben, who's across town in St. Mary's, is the man. That guy's a legend. He was in our class a couple times. I love that guy. I can't speak highly of him. I have been very blessed in my life that the majority of priests I know have been good priests. There are a lot of bad priests, though. I'm going to say that. There's tons of bad priests. And it's not just people who are non-Catholics, like all these bad priests. Listen to what Pope Clement VI says about priests. And so the criticism is interior too, which leads to further sadness. Luther was an Augustinian monk. Would that he have reformed from within, right? Anyways, people are angry at the mendicant orders. These are the begging orders, the Franciscans, etc., right? In 1351, a group of parish clergymen presented a signed petition to Pope Clement VI in anger due to the emergence of these mendicant orders. They were upset because the mendicants were providing the laity with religious services, and they believed the right to give those services belonged only to them. How dare you? The Pope defended these friars and, quote, accused the clergy of wasting their wealth on pimps and swindlers and neglecting the ways of God. So he's like, get out of my face, get the whatever out of here. You guys are mad at them for imitating Christ. Francis, rebuild my church and actually being priests, and you guys are just living the high life like fat cats, whatever. Get out of my face. So it is not something like, oh, only Protestant. Like, no, like we are very blessed here. Thank God. I would say almost in the diocese of Boise writ large. Nampa, where you were at St. Paul's, like I said, the church I got married in, I know that parish fairly well. I've seen to be, encountered a lot of very good priests in my life. I'm very grateful to that. But it's like, it's not just the enemies of the church that point out bad priests. Sadly, there are bad priests. You know why? Because we're all people, right? And there's good and bad people everywhere. But back to page number 6, guys, last point, we're done. Has anyone heard of what the relationship of the Sacred Heart devotion to the French Revolution? Anyone heard about this? What is it?
I'm pretty sure was it, I think Louis the 14th, 14th was asked to devote France to the Sacred Heart. He denied it, and then 100 years later, the French fleet.
Precisely. Saint Margaret Mary Alacoque of the Sacred Heart devotion apparently told Louis XIV, Christ would like you to put the Sacred Heart in the French flag. And he just ignores that, and you have the French Revolution. Like, don't ignore stuff God tells you to do. I'm not trying to be funny at all. I'm being actually dead serious. Same thing happens at Fatima. If you don't stop offending God, well, obviously people didn't stop. We have a Second World War. Maybe it is God's just judgment, because what is going on at this time? The Black Plague is 1347 to 1350. What is going on? What's going on between 1309 and 1377? The Avignon papacy. Does God like that? This kind of schismatic behavior and stuff, moving the papacy out of Rome? Probably not. So maybe the Black Plague is punishment for this kind of nonsense. I say maybe because I submit with true trembling fear. It says, 1 Philippians 2:12, right? Work out your salvation in fear and trembling. I tremble. God have mercy on me. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like, oh, I'm better than these people. But I'm just saying, like, you do schismatic stuff, you don't listen to God, maybe you get punished in this way. Okay? What do you all think? I'm done. I'm gonna Betsy Johnson. Actually, I'm gonna read one thing from Betsy Johnson. Betsy Johnson wrote, my attorney grandfather used to order first issue stamps sent to the family dog, Andy, addressed as, quote, Mr. Andrew Anthony Ashley Esquire, end quote. I love the stories about your grandfather, Betsy. What was the one that he met someone super famous? If you could put in the chat, you told him that he sat on some famous guy's lap. It was like Babe Ruth or something, it was a hilarious story. It was awesome. It was he actually, or John Wayne or whatever, I forget what it was. But your grandfather's come up multiple times in the class. He's awesome. Thank you. Please always continue to share stories. Addressing a dog as Esquire is great. I support that fully. As pretentious as it is for people, it's great for animals, I think. I'm done with my comments about whatever, oh, Betsy writes Booker T. Washington. Yeah, it's awesome. Booker T. Washington is a crazy important American historical figure. That's freaking sweet. Yeah, his grandfather is like the real life Forrest Gump. Like, he did all this crazy stuff, and maybe the legend of Forrest Gump is based on him. I don't know. But yeah, getting to sit on Booker T. Washington's lap is really, really cool. It's a really cool story. And exactly, thank you for, I totally missed the person, but I remember that story stuck with me so much of like him and some famous person. Thank you for specifying who. It might be God's punishment. What do you think? I'm done. Class is over. Take us out. What do you all think? Is it not? What's your take?
So first of all, to titles are important. Because you don't have titles, you don't actually know what the person is doing in relation to your life. If you look at communist Czechoslovakia versus pre-communist.
I know where you're going. I want to address everyone comrade. I just want to be comrade. We should all be comrade. What's wrong with them?
Yeah, the formal and the informal, which has now fallen out of disfavor. The relationships, unless you're raised in an American egalitarian society where the bosses know who they are and can competently handle being a boss. If you don't have those titles, people don't know how to respond to you. If you come into a factory in the Czech Republic and act friendly, they think you are their friend. they will stop to take orders from you. The formal and the informal, the titles are important. I, as a lawyer, was always Mrs. Dr. Prickle in Prague, always. No one ever dared use the informal, no one ever dared, my secretaries were always informal. It was very clear, it made life easy, so titles are important, not pretentious, maybe every culture doesn't respond similarly, but generally in Western culture, titles have been important. There's a difference between a medical doctor and a PA. I'm sorry, there is. If you don't have MD behind the title, if you have DO, there's a difference. PA is different. So I'm sticking with Esquire, maybe pretentious, but it's still nice to have on the letterhead.
You know, I don't know, that's a beautiful defense, and like,
So-
you've shown your courtroom skills, like, you know, I rest my case, like, that was well defended. I am very partial towards informality, I just am, I don't know.
Because
Like-
we're American, and as
Yeah,
Americans, we
No,
are.
I know, but like, so here's what, like, believe me, but I also have this strong European strain of, I don't think like me and my students are the same, or we're all buddy, I don't. I think that like, I don't know, like, think about being feared and loved. For me, it's all about the latter. Like, I want people to respect me out of like that perfect contrition of like, I love this guy, like I want to go to war for him, rather than he's just a real kind of like hard guy who's gonna like yell at us. I don't know. And again, well, I'm definitely speaking in hard generalities here. Like,
But you need both.
yeah, I know. And again, I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm saying I disagree with you while acknowledging your correctness. Like, I think you do. I just think like some people who are just like,
But your students are also Americans, and they
Yeah.
understand the hierarchy.
yeah, maybe, I don't know. I don't know. Like, I just think like some guy who comes in like, you know, who wants to do what you said and has all good intentions, can just come up with some like puffed up guy, like, I don't know, like, yeah, I'm not saying I want my doctor to come and be like, so I'm all about, you know, buddy, bro, fishing stories. We're just two frat guys. I'm not saying that. I don't, I'd rather authority flow from actual skill, is what I'm kind of saying. Like, I have no problem with people who are informal, who are competent. I think it's a double fail, someone who doesn't have the ability to do the job and tries to compensate, but I'm going to be real, like, I'm doctor, I'm whatever, kind of stuff. That's like the double fail. So maybe find some balance. Betsy agrees with you. She says, obviously, Betsy agrees with you. Everyone's ganging up on me. Everyone think about my. Betsy says I lean towards Marie's position.
Well, the military is the place to retire. Pretty important.
And so that's why I'd say too, like, I don't want other places to be like the military. Like, when I tell someone, indeed to you, like, thank you for your service, I mean it sincerely, not as a cliche. Like, I have the highest respect for the brave men and women who serve our armed forces. I don't want other places to be run like the military. It's so awkward. Like, it's kind of like just yes sir, no sir, like immediately, you know, whatever you want me. Like, it's good. You need it in the military. There could be no no discussion of who's on charge on that boat. It's the admiral. You have to follow what he says. Period. There's no like, well, admiral, bro. Like, I agree 1,000%. But I'm saying that exactly, if it's a life or death situation, you need it. It's an operating room. It has to be the MD calling the shots. What we're going to do. Not all the nurses are going to weigh in. Like, no, he's I get it. That's life and death. In other situations, like, you have to be like, I don't know, like I would literally vomit out of embarrassment if I was like at a barbecue and I was walking around like, I'm Dr. Rush, I'm Dr. Like, I would want someone to come and punch me in the back of the neck. Like, honestly, just like so forced. Like, what is the point of doing that right here? Like, let me, if there is anything great in me by God's grace, let that be found in like my writings, my teaching, not me saying that my title is blank.
And
So-
we're talking about situational things though, right?
Yeah, sure.
In your classroom, you're very different than when you're walking around in the barbecue.
Right.
And, there are different styles of leadership, okay? I am a forceful person. I know that I am a forceful person. I can go into a room and make people be quiet without addressing me as Mrs. Doctor.
Sure.
It is clear, though, to everyone, when I walk in and I'm Mrs. Doctor, that I don't have to be as forceful, that I can be Mrs. Doctor and say, here are my points, and this is what we're negotiating.
That's again, I have no disagreement with anything you're saying
So
from
there
an
are
argumentative
different
standpoint.
styles
Sure.
of leadership.
Yeah.
If you can lead without it, brilliant.
Yeah,
Not everyone can. and
Sure.
not every Stands alone.
Sure, again, like you, I'm not saying this to be nice. I want to only say true things. That is so well articulated, and everything you're saying is correct. I just don't like that style. That's right. I mean, like, sure, yeah, exactly. Like, but if you want defense of that style, there it is. That's right. That's true. Betsy says the title should reflect actual competence and accomplishments. They should. It's just like Betsy. So like, I don't know. Like I would. So here's maybe just like in the Catholic world. Pick your favorite Catholic person who's like Dr. Blank, whatever. And he's a doctor like I am. He's not a medical doctor. He's a doctor of philosophy, whatever, doctor of theology. If this guy is on, I'm not going to mention any names, Brian Alexander. If this guy is, I'm not going to mention any names, but seriously, if this guy's like on EWTN, one of these shows, right? Okay, we know you have a level of achievement, and God be praised. That is very commendable. And I can see your level of actual competence and accomplishments, like you said, Betsy, by your oratorical skill, the way you conduct the interview, your books. If you insist people call you doctor, I want to punch you. I'm just saying, I want to hit you. It's like you are literally, there's no purpose in that. Like you are over the top. You are trying to do this kind of weird power play about, but I'm Dr. Mark, blah, 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 blah. Like it's like so I'm just saying again, like I mean this when I say, who cares what I think? I mean that sincerely. It's just my opinion. I'm saying that I am disgusted by that.
Do your kids call you dad or Frenchman?
Well, of course, but yeah, no. And in fact, I am Marie when it comes to my kids. My kids once jokingly called me Grash, and I absolutely not. You guys do not call me that because they're my kids. Like there's a father parenting role. I don't look at being a professor as like I'm these kids guys' parents or something, or I'm their lord, their feudal lord. I do, in fact, again, throwing more bones in your direction. When I tell my class, they're welcome just to call me Groshin. It's fine to be informal. I say, please, on assignments, write Dr. Brzezinski. Of course, it's a formal assignment. It's like whatever the sheet that's submitted in court, like, it's the affidavit, whatever. And that's why I prefer to wear suits to talks, whatever. I like formality. I am just simply saying, like, I'd be disgusted if I went over to like Meg Clark's house for dinner and insisted that her whole family call me doctor. I mean, it's disgusting.
Again, so
It's situational. Yeah. Yeah, again, so see, I'm coming closer to your point more and more. Okay, if it's just professional, I'm saying that some people abuse this and are always like, I'm Dr. Smith, and it's like you're Dr. Toolbag.
Yes, there are, but it's a whole different level of pomposity.
Meg, what do you think? Where do you stand on this? I feel like you're with Betsy and Marie as well, which is totally fine. Well, but I will not put words in your mouth. You speak for yourself.
When Howard Chase introduces you to come make an announcement, he says Dr. Graff, and that's appropriate. Because then people know you have some qualification.
Sure, that's very fair. That's fair. Well, that's why I have Dr. Groshin on my website. Indeed, I consider Father Chase my like brother. I love him. I would never call him Chase. That's so disrespectful. He's a priest. He's Father Chase, right? Even if we became best. So I like formality, and your point is taken. That's why on the website I have Dr. Groshin. It's maybe I'm missing the point. I've been wrong all along. Situationally, I just don't like it outside of its necessary use.
Right.
I do not like it in normal society. I do not like the pumped up, pretentious, like a guy, imagine hypothetically going to a coffee shop and saying like, what name? What's Dr. Brown? That kind of crap. Just say Frank, dude, you're in a coffee shop. And what I'm saying, I guess I have seen that too often. I've seen that nonsense too often of people doing that. It's just like, it's just nauseating. Betsy writes, it's proper to make a distinction between a casual social situation and workplace academic environment. Yeah, for you, Betsy, I make no distinctions in life. I never make distinctions. I'm lucky if I can fit this part of the tie into this one. This is how informal I am.
In coffee shops, I like to tell them to call Catwoman.
Yeah, there you go. That is both funny and way better. On the note of Catwoman, who wants to close out the class? That was great. That was not a rabbit hole. It was a really cool discussion. One of the reasons I love this job so much is look how good we covered the Black Plague, and we get these other interesting stuff too. So it's always a very fun discussion. I wish more were here for it. I stand by what I said earlier that we've had so many different people file through the class. If everyone who's attended this class and the first 4 classes here today, we'd have like 23 people. It's just they've come at different times. So hopefully we can get everyone, maybe the Titanic lecture, Hindenburg, one of these more exciting ones. Anyways, anyone want to take a position on whether it's God's judgment or not, or etc.?
We can't say because we don't know God's mind, but it does seem, if we look historically, as with Saint Margaret Mary or Mary Margaret, she warned the king. God had spoken to her. Noah was told to build the ark. Like it seems to me that when God wants to make a point of punishing us, he tells us. And the other things are just, we have to think about them ourselves, and yes, we're always being punished for something, so we should think about it ourselves, and I don't think we get to mete out our own punishment
Okay,
by being self-flagellant, so.
okay, who else wants that in? Again, I'm not gonna add anything, you heard my point, that we kind of agree, I don't know, what do you all think?
I think you really can't know about Revelation. You need. But you should treat things like it is God should. And that should probably be the right way to respond to it, is to treat it as a chastisement, treat it as a calling for me to reform my life and to offer up suffering.
Got it, it's like St. Paul, rejoice in all circumstances kind of thing.
Something like that, is that, if you don't, it's like, if you can't know, it either is or it isn't a judgment from God. If it isn't a judgment from God, then you should may as well reap spiritual reward from it anyway.
It's never bad to do penance and reform your life.
If it is judgment, if it is judgment from God, then great, you've probably done what God wanted you to do if you're reaping spiritual reward from it.
Okay,
And prayer.
Miss Meg, Mr. Brad, any thoughts? Any final thoughts? Do you think it's God's judgment or not, Black Plague? Do you think the black, well, you never caught it, yeah, well, by accident of time. But you're right, I mean, are you wrong? You're not wrong, you didn't catch it, so praise God.
Wasn't it you who made the point in the very first class, where it said as Christians we're called to be the light of the world? Was it Dennis then? Like,
It might have been Deacon Dennis, yeah.
and that too, maybe it's just a time for Christians to say, we're different, and this is why, because we have faith in God, and we'll put ourselves.
No matter
out
what.
there for you.
Well, okay, well, on that note, we're gonna close it out, guys, God bless you, I'm, as always, in the mix of the very serious, the very jovial, the combative, all these things, let me finish on a point of sincerity. I sincerely thank you all for being here. I really respect you to the ends of the earth. Your intelligence, the comments you bring to class makes the class very, very special. It really does. Like I said so many times, I love lecturing, speaking, talking about, I would record this to the camera and just post it online. But having people in person is just so special. So thank you for that. We're not going to be meeting on Monday because of Labor Day, because everything is closed, everything is off. I would never violate this kind of, even violate the spirit of this American holiday when it's an off day to do work, but I will make a video nonetheless. I will still have a video up for Monday's lecture so we stay on task. I don't want to fall behind. Originally, when Father and I were sketching out this class in 2019, I don't know if anyone knows this, but the original plan was to have like a mini class, like every year, just like a 6-week class. And I was like, no, I'd like to do a full semester. And as always, I'm so grateful to him for everything. He was like, okay, we've always had these semester-long courses. I think are really good because they're a mini class. We wouldn't be able to cover as much. It goes without saying. Because it's a long class, because it goes all the way to December 7th, if we just take Labor Day off and then do that lecture behind, whatever. So there will be a video on maple syrup history for all of you to get caught up on. And I believe it's on what? I think it's the 17th century famines already. And then when we come back on Wednesday, perhaps we're already talking about the Lisbon earthquake. We're moving ahead. We're going to be like in the 1900s already, within 2 weeks or so. So, and then we stay in the 20th century all the way until 9/11. So until then, God bless you all. Becca and Betsy, thank you for joining us. Have a great rest of your day. See ya.